Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of My Bigfoot Sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of run-down no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, love's in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
Going back to when I was young, I've mentioned before that my parents and I have heard a lot of sounds that we just didn't understand. It didn't fit anything natural. And after my encounters in 83, that whole weekend that we were hunting, I was reading everything I could find on them for years. And then in 2014, after my first sighting, I got on the internet. And I started watching all the shows I could. And if I could find recordings of what people thought they sounded like, I'd listen to them. And one day I was listening and I heard these recordings and I just had chill run up me. That's what I heard when I was a teenager. And then I kept hearing different sounds that I thought, well, that's what we heard. We just didn't know what they were at the time. And when I was about 10 years old, I had a couple of really bad dreams. I think they were like a summer apart, one summer, and then the next summer I had another one. But the first one, I was sleeping in bed, and back then we didn't have air conditioners running at night. We just had the windows open, a nice cool breeze of the evenings. And I was sound asleep, and I heard something. And I looked over at the window, and there was this huge, hairy face looking in at me. And I could see the big, broad shoulders. But I couldn't move. I laid my head down and I just was froze. I could not move. I could not holler. I just actually froze there. And then I heard what I thought it was moving on. I looked back up and it was gone. And I thought, I had to be dreaming that. I must have been asleep and just dreaming it. And I've always thought about that. But I always thought it was just a dream. Well, the next summer, I was sound asleep, windows open, and I heard something outside the window walking through the grass. And as it went past the window, it let out a growl. It kind of slowed up for just a split second and looked towards me and growled. And it was like, I can't do it justice, but it was kind of like, and was a whole lot deeper and a whole lot louder. But again, I thought, I was dreaming. That wasn't real. Well, then while I was listening to all these internet stories, I heard several people said the same thing when they were kids, that they would come up to the window, look at them, sometimes growl at them. And I heard one guy, he did the same thing I did, that same kind of growl. And it was just what I heard. And I thought, well, I guess those weren't really dreams. And but at that time, I had no idea what it was, because the first time I ever heard anything about a Bigfoot was on the CBS Evening News. And I think it was Dan Rather reporting it on Patty. And they showed her, walking across there. And I just thought, wow, I'm glad they're not around here. Little did I know. But, that was pretty unnerving to realize that, that wasn't dreams. It actually was something out there. And that was pretty much it when I was younger. Back up to after I had my first sighting, I knew they were around my home at this time. And I thought, I'm going to set 5 glass beads out. And, well, they're about the size of a quarter. And they're fairly thick. I put 5 in a row, straight line. And then I had a necklace. It looked kind of Indian style. It had feathers. They were metal, but they looked like feathers hanging off the end. And I lined it up straight, pretty close to the beads. Well, I went on a run. I was gone for 2 days and came back home. And, I happened to think I need to go out and check that, see if anything happened. And first thing I thought, I wonder if the birds messed with it. And so I walked around the house, and these were on top of a pump house, an old pump house that was out back. And when I got there, I noticed that the 5 beads in a straight line were no longer a straight line. There had been 1 taken, and then the other 4 were made into a square. They just put them right side by side into a 4 square. And the necklace had been picked up and set back down. And I thought, well, they took one of the beads, and I don't think a bird would have rearranged the beads into a square. And I called Chuck and was visiting with him and told him about it. And he said, I'm going to be out there this weekend. We can look around and see if anything else had happened. Well, when he got here, we were walking up to that pump house, and I was getting pretty close, and he hollered, stop, stop, stop. And he pointed at the ground next to the pump house. There was a 17-inch track right beside where I'd laid those beads. I said, well, that proves what picked them up. I didn't even think to look down around the ground when I got home. It was pretty hard-packed grass, but it was right in the edge of some dirt and grass, and it was definitely make the outline out what it was. And so that was interesting. Right in the backyard, right behind my house, is where it was at. And maybe a week later, we had a really rough storm come through, and it knocked out all the power all night long. And I had to get up. It was 3 or 4 in the morning to go on a hot shot run. And just as I was getting out of the bed, I heard the little one out back, right in the backyard. It was too loud to be, it was so close. It was loud. And I got up and went downstairs quietly, and I peeked out the windows to see if there were any yard lights anywhere, and there wasn't. Everybody's power was out. And I thought, well, I better get ready. And about that time, I hear a whoop, and it was very loud. And I thought, that's right in the backyard. And I thought, oh, great. I really don't want to go outside with them out here. And I got ready, and I was fixing to go outside and start the pickup. And I had a siren going off in my backyard. It was, just like a fire truck. It was going up and down, but it was in my backyard. Oh, wow. I'm not going out there with these things here, because my pickup was on the north side of my house, and, I could see the whole backyard. And then I thought, oh, I've got a remote start for it. I'll just remote start it. And I remote started it and waited about 5 minutes, kind of let the pickup warm up. And then we headed to the pickup. But, I didn't see anything. I kind of shined the lights out that way, but they were already hid. But that was pretty interesting to hear that loud. And, not 20 feet from the house. It was very, very loud. And after the tornado, I've been trying to get my hunting buddy Rick to come out and just sit out here and listen, see if he could hear them. He'd already had one encounter. He had seen one, and his first one. And I told him, I said, well, there's no wind. It ought to be a good night to hear some. It was in May, and it's typically when I hear them the most. And so he came out, and he got here just before sunset. And I was telling him, listen to the coyotes, and you might hear one that has a little more power, and it'll sound pretty decent, and then it'll change. And he said, what do you mean change? I said, the vocal will change. And he said, okay. Well, it wasn't 5 minutes, and all of a sudden to the southwest, the coyotes lit up. And I was north of Rick, and he's looking south. I was kind of behind him. And that one was just a little louder, just more power. And all of a sudden it changed vocals. And Rick turned around with me. His eyes were huge. And he said, that wasn't a coyote. I said, nope, that's one of them. And they do a pretty good imitation of coyotes. But like I said, they've got more power. And so many times I've heard them change. Because this one went from the typical coyote yipping and howling to and it really got Rick's attention. That was the first time he got a good listen, that he knew what it was. Well, we sit there for 10 or 15 minutes. It got quiet, and he turned and said, make that call. And he was referring to the first one I heard when we were camping out deer hunting, and that I thought it was a gathering call. And I told him, I said, well, that's kind of a gathering call, and they're not going to recognize my voice. So they may be coming after us. And it wasn't dark yet. He said, go ahead. I said, okay. And I did that call, and instantly got a reply that it was a howl growl, and it was angry. And then it wasn't just seconds after that. This the first time I'd heard this kind of knock. I call it a triple knock, but there's no way a human could knock that fast and that loud. It was just bam, bam, bam. And it was extremely loud. And, these things had to be over a mile away. And then it was answered to the east of it. Same way. Bam, bam, bam. And he said, have you heard that before? And I said, no. That was a new one. And we sat there for a good while. It was dark. And he said, make another call. I said, it's dark. They could be coming around us from any direction now. He said, okay, I'm ready. So, okay. So I did it again, and I immediately got an answer, but it was from the opposite direction. They had come behind us down in the creek, and the same howl, growl, and angry. And he said, man, they got around here quick. I said, yeah, they moved pretty quick. And, we were watching that direction where it came from. And then all of a sudden, this light shoots out from the north side of the farm. And it was very long. It went from the north side to the south side. And we're sitting there looking at this, and I look both directions to see what's making this light source. It was a narrow beam, and maybe 5 feet wide at the most. It could have been a 3 to 5, but it was white with some reds and blues in it. But it came out just like from the movie Star Wars, a lightsaber. Came out, was there 3-4 seconds. We had time to look both ways, and then it went back, same way it came. And we didn't say anything for a second. Rick finally said, "Did you see that?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What'd you see?" And I said, the same thing, looked like a lightsaber came out, except it was almost a half mile long. And he said, "I've never seen anything like that." He said, "I've seen weird lights, but nothing like that." And when I was at the Knobby Bigfoot Festival, Ron Moorhead was speaking, and he started talking about this light that was like a lightsaber came out and went back. And I couldn't sit there any longer. I went back to talk to his wife, asked her questions, and she said, "Have you seen one of these?" I said, "Yes." I said, "Mine was a lot bigger than what he described." And she said, "You stay here because Ron will want to talk to you." And we visited a good while with Ron. And he asked me, he said, "Did you have any Bigfoot activity?" I said, "Yes, we just had 2 howl growls angry at us and then 2 tree knocks." And he said, "Well, that's what happened to us. We had lots of activity when that light came out. We don't know if it's connected, but now I've heard a lot of stories about orbs and strange lights around, if there's several Bigfoot around. I've heard that from some pretty good, reliable sources. And we still haven't figured out to this day what that was. The next one, I was on a hotshot run, and I was on a hotshot run down by southwest corner of the state, well, more south central. And that area is well known for a lot of Bigfoot sightings. And it was starting to storm pretty bad, raining pretty good. And I was headed west. The sun was down, but it was still fairly light. But I could see this one running from my right to my left. And he was big. And he came across, and he ran in front of a pickup. I was behind. And when he got to the center of the road, he jumped. And there was a pickup coming at me. And from my viewpoint, he looked twice as tall as the pickups, and they were both half-ton Chevys. And I think he jumped to try to clear that pickup that was coming at him. But he came across so fast that he had already hit the center line and jumped clear over into the other ditch before the pickup in front of me was able to hit his brakes. And he was very close to him. But, he was flying. I've heard that they don't like lightning, and it was popping all around. But the pickup that was coming at me, all of a sudden I noticed his headlights came straight up, and he flew past me. So I guess he had a good look at it. But that pickup, he punched it after jumped in front of him. And I just like to know what he was thinking about. And I had a dash cam running, and I got it recorded. But, the dash cams are kind of a fisheye. And this particular one makes everything look 3 times farther than it was. But you can definitely see him. You can see him go in front of the one, jump. And when he's in midair, you can see his arms come up in the air, and you can see his legs. And then he comes down on the ground. I've been looking for somebody I could trust to enhance that, blow it up, and make it clear to see him. But, you can definitely tell what it is. I kind of did some homemade zooming in. It pixeled a little bit, but I could run it shot by shot of the video and get a pretty good look at it. But that was interesting, just to see how that big boy could run. Yeah, he was fast. And he jumped a long ways. Once he leaped from the middle of the road, it was probably 30 feet into the ditch where he landed. And that same summer, it was getting late in the afternoon, and I happened to look to the southeast of where I was staying in my RV after the tornado. And I saw something in the weeds in that creek. I thought, is that a cow? It looks too black to be one of the cows. And I was at my son's shop house, and I ran upstairs on it so I could get a good look from the balcony. And I could see him. I said, that's a squatch on all fours going through the weeds. So I ran back down, got my camera, and checked. It had 3/4 of a battery left. I thought, well, I've got plenty. And I ran back up, zooming in, looking at him. And I was fixed to take a picture, and the camera went dead. That was 3/4 of a charge. And this camera, I can take pictures forever on it. It always holds a good charge. But it went dead, and I didn't get a picture. Because I saw him on all fours going through the weeds, and he'd stop and he'd raise his head and look to see where he's at, then he'd go back down. But, he was a big flat back, and, definitely wasn't a cow. But he was, even on all fours, he had to be close to 5 feet tall on all fours. He was pretty big and very black. And the hair on him was just really shiny. One of the prettier ones that I've seen. But I've heard stories of how batteries have gone dead. And I've had that happen with my thermal. And that thermal, I'll stay charged for months using it. It just lasts forever. And I grabbed it one night out here to check something that was in the pasture. And I knew it was a squatch, but I was going to look at it through thermal, and got it out and turned it on and started looking, trying to find it, and it went dead. And it was fully charged. It just went completely dead. So I didn't get to look at that one on thermal. And that summer, I was going to go up to a little state park in the northwestern part of the state. Chuck had told me about a huge tree structure up there on the south side of that park, kind of down towards the river. And I wasn't doing anything, and it was off, so I thought I'd go. And about that time, my ex-wife came by to pick up some mail, and she said, "Where are you headed?" I said, "Oh, I'm going up to the park to look at a structure Chuck was talking about." And she said, "Do you care if I go?" I said, "No, if you want to go." So we went up there, and we went down to where the structure was, and it was all taken down. I think the park rangers take them down when they find them. And I said, "Well, let's walk through these trees. There's a trail that goes back off to the south to the river." And we were walking through there, and I was looking up in the trees, and they were huge, huge trees. And there was branches 20 and 30 and 40 feet off the ground that were 10, 12 inch thick. And I thought, boy, this is a good spot for them to day watch. So I was kind of watching around up there, and we got down on the edge of the river. It dropped off into the river bottom, and it was just loaded with Johnson grass and willow trees and cottonwoods. But there was a trail that went off into that Johnson grass. And so I stopped there for a second, just kind of look around. I thought, that's not a good place to go. And then I heard a howl to the south. It was probably a mile away. And then all of a sudden, in that Johnson grass, it couldn't have been 15 feet from us, I heard what sounded like two little kids giggling. And I just froze for a second. I thought, there's no kids down here. And they sure wouldn't be off in that Johnson grass. And they did it again. And I asked my wife, kind of quietly, I said, did you hear that? She didn't answer. And I said aloud, I said, did you hear that? And the third time I said it, she said, I can't hear anything. She said it pretty loud. I turned and looked at her. She was doubled over, grabbing her ears. And I immediately knew what was going on. And I turned around towards where I heard the noise. And I said, stop it. I said it loud. And then they hit me. I think we both got hit with infrasound. Because my ears instantly went to ringing terribly. And my right jaw was hurting. And it just, like your ears need to pop, but it had a lot of loud ringing in it. And she said, what's going on? And I said, it's them. And I looked down the trail just to kind of see if I could see anything down in there. And then she asked me, said, well, we going down in there? I said, no, they're telling us to leave. But there's two little ones right here. And I said, we need to go. So we turned around and went back to the pickup, and we drove into town and ate something, and I was going to see how her ears were doing, and mine wasn't any better, and hers wasn't either. And she said, I don't understand that. I said, well, it's called infrasound, and it's at levels below what our hearing can hear, 20,000 decibels or less. And, took her home. I called her next day. I said, are your ears still hurting? She said, no, it's pretty much gone. And she said, what about yours? I said, yeah, my ears aren't ringing, but my right jaw is really hurting. And I said, well, it'll probably get better in a few days. Well, that rocked on for almost a year. And I've got a chiropractor in Tulsa that I go to that does things a little different. And I was up there for my back, and I told her, I said, my jaw's hurting too. I said, I think it's out of the line. And she looked at it and she said, wow, yeah, it is. And she said, what did you do to get it out this far? And I said, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. She said, no. She said, I want to know what happened. I said, okay. And the way they fix these jaws is they call it sonar. It's sound waves and vibrations. And so I told her, well, it came from a Bigfoot. And she just looked at me like, oh, you're crazy. And I said, no. I said, they are real. And I told her the story. And I told her about the infrasound. I said, I know people that's been sickened by it, have diarrhea. They've kind of completely confused in an area that they're very familiar with. They get lost. And she said, well, infrasound, that makes sense. And she put it back in, and it was fine after that. I hadn't had any problems since. That was my first encounter with the infrasound. My next one is up on the Canadian River in northwest Oklahoma. I was doing a hot shot run, and it was on state property. And I had to go wade back down into the river. It was several miles. And they had a whale down on the edge of the river bottom. And they needed me to pick up some jet rod. And I was down there, the company man was asking me about if I heard anything else lately. And I told him about a little one. And he was always interested in the Bigfoot stuff. And we visited a little bit, and then we started heading out. And you go up about a mile and a half, and there's a pond and trees and creeks and a lot of cover and a lot of turkey and deer in there. In fact, I'd seen about 20 or 30 turkey as I was coming out. And just off the road, there was some red cedar trees. There was 3 of them kind of together there. But I thought I saw some movement in there. which, I just thought it was probably a deer. And I was about 30 feet from it when all of a sudden I see these two enormous long arms reach up and grab a tree and pull itself up. And then it shot down the creek bank. And I slammed on the brakes. I jumped out and I ran over there, and the company man was right behind me. And I hollered at him. I said, "Did you see him? Did you see him?" He said, "No, where?" I said, "Right here, right where we're at." And he jumped out and ran over there, and he said, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "No." I said, "He was right here, tucked in these evergreens, these red cedars, and he was sitting down." And we tried to look, see if we could see him, and couldn't find him. And we noticed that they had used that spot a lot. Just the way the trees were, there was two kind of side by side with a gap, and then one behind them. So it was a perfect spot for them to hide in. And we got to look, and I found a deer trail, went right in front of him. So we messed up his hunt. But I had a pretty good look at. He was probably close to 7 feet, between 6 and 7, but he was kind of lanky. But he had the longest arms. Just seemed like he just kept reaching up to grab the trees to pull himself up. But he got out of there in a heartbeat. And I've had a lot of eyeshine over the years, red eyeshine in particular, and up in the northwest part and around here, and I've had several road crossings just a couple miles from here where I live, and I can't always make them out. The silhouette. Sometimes I can. Sometimes they're too far away, but they're all way taller than the pickup. And my pickup's a little over 7 feet tall at the top of the cab. And I've had one road, I come down the highway, and it's usually around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning at this one county road. I don't know how many times I've seen the red eyeshine there. And they'd look, see me coming, and they'd turn and take off. And they were all way over the top. So one day I was coming through there. I thought, I'm going to stop just see if I see any tracks. Well, I didn't see any Bigfoot tracks, but there was lots of deer tracks, and there was a lot of acorns on the ground. So I thought, well, they're either trying to get a deer or they're eating those acorns. But it was always neat to kind of look at that spot, because I always seemed like in the middle of the night I would see their eye shine. And there's been a couple of times I saw the amber eye shine, which I didn't care to see. One night I was coming home and going down the road coming to my house. It's paved, and there's lights to the south. And I was watching the road, and all of a sudden, those lights disappeared. And I had the LED light bar on. And then all of a sudden, these two big red eyes turned and looked at me. And he watched me as he just walked across the road. And then he hopped over the fence, and he was gone. But, he was in no hurry. He just kept coming looking at me. And on that same road, not 100 yards south and then back west, I was coming in one night, and there's lights at the church close to where they were at. And then there was lights to the southwest, silhouetted, and it was it wasn't a moonlit night, but there was enough moon that, you could see things pretty easy. And all of a sudden I thought, there's two standing right there, about 100 feet from me. One was real tall, and the other one just come above the top of his shoulders. And they were standing side by side looking at me. And they just froze. And I started to stop and just turn the lights on. I thought, no, they know my pickup. It's just going to spook them off. So I left them alone. And another time I was coming down that same road, and I got close to the church, and just north of the church, just a little bit into the light from the yard light, there's one standing there. But he dropped to the ground just as quick as you could drop. He went flat on the ground. And I thought, wow, how's something that big move that quick, just dropping? But he did. It's just like he took his feet out from under him and he hit the ground. And, I kept on going. I wasn't going to bother him. Then this wasn't too long ago. Well, in fact, it's about a year ago. I went outside to walk my dogs. Of course, I always carried my spotlight. And I don't know, I felt like something was out there. And I just shined the light out there. And sure enough, about 100 yards east of my house, one froze. And he was looking to the east because, I couldn't see any features other than he was standing there, and he was big and he was gray. He was kind of a dark gray, but he was gray. And he just froze. And I watched him for probably, 20 seconds, 25 seconds. And I thought, well, I'll see if there's any more out there. So I shined out a ways and was looking around, and I come back to where he's at. He was gone. Oh, okay. So I kind of checked on my dogs, and they went in the house. I shined the light back out there, and I saw him. He was probably 200 yards to the east, standing next to a brush pile. As soon as I hit him with the light, he stopped. And then I noticed on the bottom side of my spotlight, I saw two eyeshines. And I didn't move it because I could see, one of them was moving. One stopped for a second, and then he was on the far side of the creek, and he went down the bank just straight into the creek. And then the other one had to crawl a little ways before he could crawl down in the creek. So I got to see those two. It's pretty close, but, they weren't trying to bother me or anything. But I've seen what I think is two separate ones that were gray and then one silver. Because one of the gray ones had a dark streak on its back. And I've only seen that one time. And one morning I was going to Oklahoma City to pick up some tools. And I have to cross the Canadian River about halfway to Oklahoma City. And I always watch around that river. And the sun hadn't come up, but it was pretty light. It was probably up, but I'm down in the river bottom, and there's, big bluff. It was probably blocking the sunlight because it was pretty bright. And I looked to the north just as I was getting close to the river. And I always watch for the tree lines, especially, if you've got morning sun, you look on the west side of the trees because they'll be in those shadows. If they're watching something, that's where they'll be. And I noticed out a ways from the tree line, it was still in some grass, but it was a clearing there. Trees were down, and I saw what had to be a little one. He couldn't have been 3 or 4 feet tall, but he's doing backflips, just like a chimp. And I thought, is that not a calf? But I said, he's doing backflips. He was probably 300 yards. And then, right behind him was one that looked like it was sitting on a stump watching him, a big one. And I got to watch him for about a quarter mile. And he would just jump up and do a backflip. And they'd run over to the one on stump. Then he'd run back out and do a flip. That's the first time I've seen a little one even do that. But that's the first time I really got to see a little one. And then one morning I was doing the same thing. And when I get on the river bridge, I always look down the river just to see if I see anything. And that morning, it was fairly light, but about probably 250, 300 yards to the south, there was sandbank out in the middle of the river. And there was one standing right in the middle of it. And just standing there. And he never moved, didn't do anything. I thought, wow, that much traffic on there. I didn't think he would just stand there, but he was just standing there. I thought, well, I'll look when I come back through and see if he's still there or whatever it is still there. But no, it was gone. And, you know, you could tell it was something upright, and he had shoulders. I really couldn't define the legs or the arms, but I could just tell the head, the neck, the shoulders, and long, tall body. And then one evening I was coming back home and crossed the river. And again, I always looked down in the water, and it was getting fairly dark, but, you know, you can still see the water and, you know, see it pretty plainly. And I was surprised, right next to the bridge with traffic, there was one just off the edge in the water. Looked like he was trying to catch fish. And yeah, he was pretty good size. His shoulders had been a good 3.5 feet. But he was just bent over. And he was kind of a reddish brown one. But I was just shocked he was that close to Interstate 40. He just was just trying to get him some supper. My next one was a little farther off. I was making a hot shot run to North Dakota. And I was in central Nebraska, down along kind of a creek river bottom. I think it was more of a creek. It was dark. And of course I had my LED lights on, lighting up the world. And I see something just off of the ditch line where they had mowed the ditch on the highway. But right next to it was Johnson grass, it looked like. Probably 6 to 8 feet tall. And I thought there was a cow in the edge of that grass line, because I could see the complete left side. And the closer I got, I thought, that shape's not right. And just as I got to him, it reached down to its left hand and picked something off the ground and put it in its mouth. Just as I went by, I saw all that. I thought, okay, that was a squatch. And, you know, I wasn't 25 feet from him, but I got to see the whole left side. And then once I saw him reach to the mouth, I could see his head. It had a conical shaped head. But I think he might have been a juvenile teenager. He was a little lanky, but he wasn't an adult. One of the funnier ones I've had, again, I was on a hot shot run, and I was southwest Oklahoma City on Turnpike, and it was fall, and I'd noticed this big creek bottom area that they had sowed it to wheat, and it was up pretty and green, you know, probably 8 inches high. And I thought, well, they're going to put cattle on it pretty quick. And I was looking at the tree line, and this one huge tree came out over the wheat, had a big shade canopy out over the wheat. And I thought, what is that underneath that tree? And immediately I thought, that's 2 legs, that's shoulders, that's arms, because it was, you know, aimed right at me. But his head was up in the trees. And I thought, he thinks he's hiding. But I could see his entire body. I just couldn't see his head. So evidently he thought, you know, his head was up in the trees and the leaves, and nobody could see him. I thought that was just pretty comical. And then I got to realizing that tree was tall enough that a tractor could get under, because there was wheat sowed all the way around where he was standing. And I thought, yeah, it's going to be 9-10 feet to the shade of that tree. And so he was pretty good size. And that was probably another 300 yard. But, you know, it was really obvious at what it was. And I came back later through there just to see, was there something else out there that, you know, might not have been a squatch, but it was gone. And that area is also known for quite a few Bigfoot In fact, most people say southeastern and eastern Oklahoma have most of Bigfoot. Well, they're all over the state. They're in every county of Oklahoma. And there's a whole lot more in western Oklahoma than people realize. I know for a fact here in my county, there's 2 family groups. And this family group here at my home must be pretty good size. I've seen the alpha. I know 2 gray silver ones, maybe 3. And then I've seen one I thought was a juvenile, and then the other 2 were bigger. I don't know if one was a female or not. I have not yet been able to see a definite female, but got to be, because we've heard more little ones. I was hauling some equipment in. Now, this is kind of central Oklahoma, but to the north side a little bit. And it's known for Bigfoot. And I had a bunch of heavy equipment on there that I had chains on. And I thought, I'm going to get out and check my chains, make sure they're tight before I pull up on the highway. Well, I just crossed the road from a big creek and a lot of trees. And this is about 7 o'clock in the morning. And I got my big pry bar out and went around back, and I started pounding all the chains. I was making a lot of noise. And when I got through, I threw the pry bar in the toolbox, which made a lot of noise, and shut the lid on it, which was loud. And I slam it down to make sure it catches. And I get in the pickup and pull up on the highway. And just as I got straightened out, I looked to my left because I saw just a flash of something. And I realized it was a chunk of wood coming at me. And that thing came straight at me and skimmed off the top of the pickup right above my head. And I immediately looked to see where that came from, because I thought, is there somebody with equipment down there? Because this chunk of wood was about the size of a women's basketball, and it was flying. But there was no equipment. There was nobody. Didn't see a thing. And I got to thinking back, and that wood never arched down. It came straight till it skimmed the top of the pickup. And it was at least 200 feet to the tree line. And I thought, wow, that's an incredible amount of power to throw something that big that far, and it doesn't arch down. It was still just going straight when it went above me. And that's the first time I've really had anything thrown at me big. But I was making a lot of noise that early in that morning. And I've heard plenty of people say at times they do not like loud noises. And that was February, March. So I made somebody unhappy. You know, I still just can't get over that not arching down, just a line drive right over my head. One year we went down to Honubby to the festival, and we were staying at some friends and camped out. And I'd borrowed a smaller RV, but it was made out of wall field frame and chassis, very heavy. And we'd been setting up, with the campfire, just listening. And finally I went to bed about 12 o'clock. And it was about an hour later, all of a sudden that RV rocked pretty good. Yeah, I thought, well, I got one out here. I wonder what he's going to do with the guys all in the tent. But I was kind of off to myself. And, I didn't hear anything out of them. And next morning I got up and I was coming around the trailer, and I went over, I wanted to push on the trailer to see if I could move it. And I couldn't budge it. It wouldn't rock. It wouldn't do anything. It had to have been one. And then Chuck, he hollered at me. He said, "Why'd you leave your door open?" I said, "I didn't." And he said, "Well, look." I try and look. The driver's side door of my pickup was wide open. I said, "I shut that. I remember shutting it." And he said, well, it's open now. Well, yeah. And so I thought, well, I wonder. And I went over and looked in the pickup, and I'd had a Subway sandwich and a Sonic hamburger when I was going down to Honubby. And they were about half eaten. But the sacks were open. You know, it's just like he opened them up in there and ate them in the pickup. And there was fingerprints, finger marks on my console. And they were, about 3 inches long, but they were twice my width finger. It was obvious. You could see where he just put his hand down as he was looking in. And somebody hollered, said, oh, it's probably somebody trying to steal stuff. I said, my billfold's sitting here on the console. I've got a 45. I had 2 pistols sitting in there in plain sight. And I had my thermal. I had my cameras. I had everything in there, all there. And then Chuck was walking up to take a look. And then he stopped. He said, whoa, look at your window on the driver's side. There was extremely heavy dew that night. I mean, you can't see through any of the windows. And you could see where a face had been pressed up against it looking in. Everybody goes, well, that's pretty obvious. Yeah. And so we thought, let's look for tracks. And we got on the other side of the pickup. We found a big track. It was on grass, but evidently he'd stepped in mud and walked up there. And I can't remember if that was a 17 or 18-inch track. But it was pretty obvious. The handprints, the fingerprints inside the console and pickup. Nothing else was bothered. He just was snacking on my leftovers. And also, while we were there that same weekend, we were camping out the next night, and we had a fire going, and there was about 10 of us out there, and we'd been visiting for a while. And Chuck said, I'm going to go make a call. And so he walked over to the other side of a little garage, and he made a call. And I was visiting with a couple of them, and all of a sudden we hear another call. And I thought, wow, good job, Chuck. And he come running from around the backside of the garage. He said, guys, that wasn't me. Guys, that wasn't me. So we all started looking that way, and there was a church back south of there, and we saw deer running. And then there was a squatch standing out there. And they said, there he is, there he is. And me and other researcher, Larry, we took off out that way. I had my thermal, and we walked out into the pasture a little ways, and I had my thermal on trying to find him. And Larry asked me, he said, do you see anything? I said, there's something over on the ground to the south of us, about 30 yards. I said, but there's not much heat signature to it. It's really, I just tell there's something there. And so we kept looking around, and all of a sudden somebody said, there he goes. They could see him in the silhouetting from the church lights. And I turned and looked, and I saw him. And then I put my thermal on him, and we took off, chased him. Why? I don't know. Like we're going to catch him. And we ran for about 40, 50 yards, and we ran into a huge little pond. Well, I say a pond. It was probably, maybe 30 to 40 feet across. And it was pretty wide or long. And I asked Larry, I said, did you hear him go through this? He said, no, I didn't hear anything. I said, I didn't either. He said, he had to have jumped this. I was, yep. That was a long stretch for him to jump, but it looked like he had to clear it. And I panned back over to where I saw that lump on the ground, and that lump was gone. The only thing I can think was the the grass was extremely wet, and his hair was wet enough that it, I wasn't picking up much heat signature. Yeah, but that was pretty interesting because he was loud. And we walked back up to the rest of them, and Rick was there, and he said, how big do you think he was? I said, I don't know. He was pretty tall, but I don't think he was an adult. He was big enough, but he wasn't real broad. And him and another person was standing there, and they both said, he made y'all look like kids. We could see y'all and we could see him. I said, really? I said, yeah. And when he took off, he was about 30, 40 yards from us. And so that was a pretty interesting weekend there. And I've been to Hanabi several times, and pretty much every time I've been there, I've had encounters where I see them, hear them. And one time we were sitting there visiting on the where they have the Bigfoot conference. We were on their campgrounds, and we heard something coming up the north side. It slopes down to the river, and we heard something back there. So one of the guys just kind of easily strolled around and ended up over kind of where he heard it. And, he was still talking to us, and he said, there's one right here. I can hear him moving. And he told me, come on up here. So I slowly eased my way up there. And he said, on 3, turn on your spotlight. Because he had one. He was going to go one direction. I was going to go the other. And we both hit the lights on at the same time. And there was one right in front of me. And he was turning when I hit the lights on him. And I got a good look of his upper backside, his back, his left shoulder, the back of his head as he took off. So, and he wasn't 20 feet from me. He was really close. And we had a lot of calls made while we were on that trip down there. I was down there 2 years ago, and we'd parked the trailer over kind of on that north ridge, and we went down a day early before anybody shows up just to kind of see what we could hear. And we get down there about 9 o'clock. Rick and I was getting a camper set up, and we then get in the trailer about midnight, and I'd got to sleep. And all of a sudden, Rick come busted upstairs, and he said, "You feel that?" I said, "No, I was out." He said, "You didn't feel this trailer rock?" I said, "No." And he said, "It didn't rock side to side. It rocked from end to end." And my RV is a 40-foot Silver Creek, and it's heavy. It's very heavy. And he said, "Yeah, it rocked from end to end." And then he said, "I heard a mumble." And then he said, he said, "It had to have been one chewing on another one." Because it was really, and he said it sounded kind of female. She was really letting him have it. And yeah, I didn't hear any of that. And then it wasn't, he went back to bed, and about 15 minutes later, I felt the trailer move again. And so he came back. I went out to look for prints and couldn't find anything. And he had to been on my end where there was a bunch of metal. They had pushed that hard on the rest of the trailer. It's all fiberglass. I think something would have popped. But Rick thought it was funny. It sounded like the one got chewing out. And the next evening, Rick had he had a flare, and I had my thermal. I can take pictures, but I can't take video, which I really don't like. But at least I can get snapshots, and it worked that time. We were sitting on the edge of that bluff, and there was a lot of brush down below us. And we both thought there was something around. And we sat there for a good little bit, and all of a sudden we heard some movement. So I turned on my thermal, and Rick turned on his flare. I was shining down. Well, I got a heat signature right in front of me. And I couldn't make it out to start with, and all of a sudden it turned, and it was its head. And Rick said, "I've got one over here." And I said, "All I can see is the head." And they're looking up at us. We both said the same thing. They're looking up at us. And every once in a while, I'd get a picture. And then when he turned his head to look at the other one, I'd get another one. So I got 3 or 4 thermal shots. And, at times you can see him move his mouth. One time it looked like a big O way he moved his mouth. But he'd get a pretty good side profile. But, they couldn't have been 20, 25 feet from us. But I think they were juveniles, very young. They didn't look very big. I think they were just curious at what we were doing. And that was pretty much for that trip. And the next trip going down, we were coming in from the west and had a car in front of me. And I noticed it started hitting its brakes real quick. And then I thought that car's going to come across the road backwards. Because all I could see was 2 what I thought were red taillights. And it was a Squatch running across the road. Once he got on the road, I could tell, whoa. And that car just almost come to a stop in the road. And I had that 40-foot fifth wheel on the back. I was trying to shut it down. And Rick didn't catch it. He said, What was it? What are they doing? I said, "You didn't see it?" He said, "Did I miss another one?" And I said, "Yep, Bigfoot ran right across the road." And I said, at first I thought it was a car going backwards coming across the road. But now, once they got close, I could see that it was not a car. It was a Squatch when they went across the road. That car went about 2 miles and it pulled off the road. He was going slow, like he was rattled, and he pulled off on the shoulder and stopped. And when I had my RV up here after the tornado, I had it pulled in behind my son's shop house, and I had built the dog pens about 6-7 feet from the trailer, just long enough that I could get my slide out and still walk between them. And one night, I was asleep, and my one little schnauzer, she jumped up. I felt her move, like she moved real quick. And I thought, what's the matter with her? And all of a sudden I hear this noise, and then I hear like hair going down the side of the trailer. And then all of a sudden my slide out, the bedroom, was shoved up. It actually moved that whole slide out. And then I could hear the hair going down the slide out right by my head. And I got up next morning and went out, and I thought, I'm going to see if I could move that slide out. It's a king size bed slide out. I couldn't budge it. I'm 6'3", I'm fairly strong, and no, I couldn't budge it. But he shoved that thing up, and I bounced back down when he let go. And, the ground was hard packed, and I couldn't see any tracks. I was hoping I'd see some. And then one night, I was sound asleep, and all of a sudden I heard these thumps, just almost impact tremors, because it was shaking the trailer. And there was 5 of them. And it ran past the south end of the trailer, and then it jumped the 6-wire fence. And I thought, well, there was only one thing that could have been. That was not a quadruped. That was bipedal. And he was heavy. And of course I went out to see if I could see tracks anywhere, and I couldn't see anything. And, I'd had several encounters while I was in that RV. And after the tornado, I was kind of worried what happened to the Squatches. Tornado was just a little before dark. And it was an F4. And when it came through here, it was over a mile wide. And it tore up a tree row pretty bad, a half mile south of me. and that's the direction they come from. I didn't think they would be out yet, but sometimes they do come out early because I've seen them and the sun's still up back out here in the creek in the weeds. And this was probably a month and a half later. We was sitting in the RV, or I was, with the dogs, and all of a sudden, to the southeast of the trailer a little ways, we got this big whoops. I thought, well, they're back, but they're probably upset. There's no barn, no dog food, no nothing. But I get to hear the whoops, and then one evening, we had the trees piled up. And it was pretty quick after the tornado. I think it was probably the first time they came back up and they saw what happened. Everything was tore up and gone. And it was funny because it sounded just like a big, just everything's gone. It's just a sound of disgust. Because the trees were gone, the barns were gone, the house was gone, and the kennel was gone. But it sounded just like he was really disgusted. All gone. They used my barns quite a bit. We've gone out there another time. Chuck came out because I hadn't been out in the barn in a while. We'd been busy, and we went out in the south barn first. That's where we see them the most of the sign anyway. And we get inside, and over in the corner where the stalls doors could kind of create a security feeling for anything, kind of protected area. And on the ground, you could see where it had to be a little one, the size of the fingers. He was sitting there and he was dragging up dirt, making a little mountain. He put some paper in it and it just went all the way around, just dragging the dirt up for the mountain. And the whole width of that little mountain from where he drug it out was 2 to 3 feet. And then we went out to the other barn and we found another one. And it had some ostrich egg shells in there. I used to raise ostriches, and there were some shells in there, and he'd put pieces of those in the mountain. And, right then I was sure that they were bringing him up here, putting him in the barn while they come up to look for dog food or trash, whatever they could find. And because we found, several things that for the little ones that had been in there, from footprints to handprints, and then those two, which I thought was kind of interesting. The next one was a little more nerve-wracking, I guess you could say. Like I say, I always walk my dogs up to carry my spotlight. And this was pre-tornado. And in fact, it was probably a week or 2 weeks before. Walking the dogs out north of the house, and we were in the dark, and I felt like something was watching us. It was overwhelming. Something was watching us. It just was one of the stronger feelings I'd ever had. And I thought it was coming from the barn. And I just turned and hit that spotlight on the barn, and there was one standing in front of the barn. He was standing in front of the window, and all I could see of the window was a chrome piece on his left. And the window's 4 feet wide, and he covered it up. And his head come up to the roof line. And the roof line is 10 feet. And, he was looking straight at me, and he was standing up, but he was, not standing just straight up like a human. I mean, he's kind of hunched over a little, and his hands, they came down right almost to his knees. In fact, I think he could have touched his knees. And, but, as soon as I lit him up with the spotlight, he turned to his right and he was gone. I mean, he moved out of there so fast and no noise. I was about 150 feet from him. And I've had cattle run through there, and you can hear the cows running because it's noisy. But no, he didn't make any noise, nothing. He was just gone. I looked down at my one little schnauzer, and she was staring at it. She was watching. She was froze. And I kept telling her, come on, come on. And she wouldn't move. And she always, does what I ask. She's a smart little schnauzer, but she was locked up. So I had reached over my foot, and I kind of pushed her on the rear end, and she kind of shook her head like, oh. And I said, come on, let's go to the house. And they both took off running to the house. And that was had to be an alpha. Just the sheer size of him. He wasn't so much a conical shaped head. It was a little more rounded than some of the previous ones I'd seen. And he was pretty much black. There was a little bit of red tint to him under the lights. But, he was in the neighborhood of 10 feet. Also, you need to figure in magnification factor of the spotlight. I don't know how close he was to the barn. I knew he's pretty close, but if he was, standing 5 or 6 feet in front of it, then you're going to have a shadow behind him that could have made it look like he was, a little taller than he was. But still, he's going to be 9'6" or better. He's big enough. He was a big boy. And we have made some runs on the western side of the county here. Used to have a drilling rig on that location. I'd been in quite a bit, and they called me one night and said, we need you to go pick up some casing off that location. And I said, has everything moved off? They said, just about. There's a couple of trailers, and the forklift's still there. And they said, asked me if I could run the forklift for them. I said, yeah. And Rick was with me. And this down on close to the river bottom, lots of trees back in there, a lot of cover. And we got on there. I was a little uneasy. Something didn't seem quite right. And I went over and got the forklift and started over towards the casing. And my trailer was backed up there pretty close to it. And of course I had all my LED lights on and on the trailer floor. And I looked over at Rick. He was on the other side of the trailer. And he was looking like, this isn't right. He was looking back and forth. And I thought, yeah, he knows something's up too. And I was getting the casing on the forklift, and it was moving around. I had to get off a couple times to move some of it. And then I heard what sounded like teeth clatter. And it was loud. I could hear it over the forklift. And I could tell what direction it came from. And I just kind of looked back that way. And you make quite a bit of noise loading casing. It's just noisy. And they're 40-foot joints. Well, actually, they're 45-foot joints. And they bang and rattle when you're loading them. And I got the last ones on there and backed the forklift away and was fixed to put straps on. And the forklift was closer to Rick at that time. And we had a scream just off location to the south of us. And I just whirled around. And Rick didn't say anything, but I turned back around. He was looking at me with his eyes big, like, what was it? And I just shook my head, and we went ahead and strapped down, and I put the forklift back where it was supposed to be. And it's creepy down in this area. And we got in the pickup, and Rick said, what'd you see? I said, didn't see. He said, what'd you hear? I said, you didn't hear that scream? He said, no. I said, it's just after I dropped the casing on the trailer. And he said, I knew there was something out there. I could feel them watching us. I said, well, I also heard the teeth clatter. I mean, it was pretty loud. And I think there was two of them. I don't think there was more than one. And he said, okay. And I said, well, I think it's time to go. And he said, I do too. So we left out of there, but it was pretty dark other than the lights off my trailer. That's what made it worse. You couldn't see anything coming very quick if it wasn't in front or behind that pickup. And my next one is still pretty spooky to this day. This was right before the tornado. And I'd have been having a lot of activity. Like I said earlier, that I'd had a older Cherokee said these things understand the ancient Cherokee language. So I looked up and found a meaning of my friend and how to pronounce it and practiced it for quite a while. And this is about a month or so before the tornado that I knew they were out east of the house, out around the barns. I could hear them and kind of get a glimpse of shadows. So I called this out and also looked it up in Cheyenne, the same meaning. And I said both of them. And, they were coming down, maybe a couple times a week during the busy months, because they were more active on some months and not others. But after I said that, they were there every night. And they were getting closer. I think they knew then they could trust me. That's the only reason I could come up with. And I called them my friend in Cherokee. And, that's the only explanation, because they were coming right up to the house, even with me around there, because I could hear them. And my lab was telling me, bouncing up and down and looking out that way. So I kind of got used to them being there. But one night, my ex came out to pick up some mail. It was about 10 o'clock at night. And, it was a pitch black night, no wind. It was a gorgeous night. And we were out in the driveway talking. And she was asking me, said, what did that little one sound like? She'd asked me about several other things. And I said, well, I'll just do it for you. And I made that distressed baby cry. And as soon as I did, I just got a sick feeling in my stomach. I thought, how stupid can I get to make that cry? And she said, wow, that was creepy. And she got in her car and left. And I turned around and was walking back to the house. And all of a sudden, my big, brave lad went to running to the fence, barking. And all of a sudden, he just locked up the brakes and ran back to the house as fast as he could with his tail between his legs. And I had my spotlight, so I just shined it out there where he was looking. And within 150 feet of me was this huge silver, just sparkly silver Bigfoot coming at me down on all fours. Now, some of them call it a belly crawl. Some of them call it a spider crawl. It's closer to a spider crawl because he was stretched out. His arms were completely straight out, up on his fingertips, and crawling on his fingertips, but his chest and belly were probably 10 inches off the ground. And he was pushing off with his back legs. He'd fold them up to the side and push off. But he would bring his arms around just kind of like he was swimming. But he would come right back to the side, a little bit like a snow angel. Bring his arms up to a certain point, bring them back and he was coming right at me. And he didn't just stop instantly and turn. He made 2 or 3 strides at me before he did turn. And I got a pretty good look at his head. His head was at least the size of a 5-gallon bucket, a big 5-gallon bucket. Some are a little taller than others. and huge red glowing eyes. And I could see his teeth, and they pretty much were square, but he was coming at me so fast. There is absolutely no way I could outrun him doing a belly crawl. It's just incredible how fast he was. But that hair on his arms were just flowing, just so silver, just glistened. And it was a dry night. There was no dew. And like I said, I got to see 2 or 3 strides and just watched that. It was gorgeous hair. Looked like it had been manicured. And it's just amazing to the size. He had to have at least a 9-foot wingspan. It could have been bigger, but it was at least 9 feet. But he was up on his fingertips. Was all that body weight and mass was resting on his fingertips going forward. I have seen some drawings of one up like that. And Sibylla Irwin said she's going to do a sketch for me out of that one. And his face wasn't quite as sparkly silver. Right in the eyes, it was kind of a grayish tan, around the eye and the mouth. And there was hair up on the nose. And then the sides of his head had a lot of hair. And looked like he had some chin whiskers, quite a bit. They were probably 6 to 8 inches long. But I thought the way their anatomy is, I didn't see how his head was looking straight at me while he's on his belly. I didn't think their head could go back without hitting their back. But he definitely was, just looking straight at me. And with that little snarl on his mouth. But I was really glad when he turned and went behind the house. I was right in the front of the house and he went behind it. So from the initial 150 feet away to the time he turned and I was going towards the house, is pretty quick. I was probably less than 100 feet from him. But, that was my fault. He was coming to protect the little one. And I didn't want to have anything to do with him. I mean, he had torn me apart. But the spotlight turned him, which I'm very thankful. These things, I don't know what they are. There's a lot of different thought. But I think they could be some human genetics to them because at times they can mimic us perfectly. And I've had that happen to a friend. And they sounded just like the woman. And I've heard other people say that. And I've heard them mimic enough that they've got to have some type of vocal cords to mimic our language. And I think they understand more of what we say than we give them credit. And there's been stories of Bigfoot around churches at night, like they're listening. And it could be from food, because I know that I'm a Southern Baptist and we like to eat. And I think that's why these ones up north may hang around that church so much, because I see them usually after the weekend up around it when I see them there. But these things I have not had any trouble other than this one time, which was my fault. But that's not saying you don't mess with them, because they can hurt you severely. I've seen what they can do pulling trees out of the ground by the roots. And they can be bad-natured, just like people. I just don't think you need to give them anything to be mad about, especially like being around the little ones like we did up on the state park. And other than that, I wished I had a gifting spot. I'd put some more glass beads out, but I don't have any good spot since the tornadoes cleaned everything out. I'd be putting some back, and I'd just like to see if they'd take anything. as I know of plenty of people that do. And some strange things brought back to them as a gift. These things are pretty smart. And there's a whole lot more out there than people think. There's no telling how many are in Oklahoma. Just like that, the National Wildlife Department said that one county had 244 reported sightings to the Wildlife Department in a 3-month period. And probably for every one reported, there's probably 20 or 30 that weren't. Even now, I don't mind telling people what I've seen. I don't make stuff up, and most people know that about me. And I've had 15 local people come to me and tell me their stories. They've seen them run across the road. Most of them, that's what they've seen, run across the road. One was dumpster diving in town, and one was across from the golf course. And I think it's the same alpha that I saw. But this girl and her boyfriend went out to feed their horses after dark and pulled up to the gate, and he was standing on the side behind a tree. He said he was just looking out beside the tree, looking at them. And then he walked out from the tree and walked away. But needless to say, she quit feeding the horses after dark. So if you're out, be careful. Don't make any stupid calls like I did. But that one, I don't think there's a lot of people have heard that sound. Hopefully not. I've had people ask me to show them what it is so they could use it. And I said, nope, I'm not going to be responsible for you getting hurt or killed. Because that silver one, he was coming to save that little one. Because I could tell by the grimace on his mouth, he wasn't happy. But, they're neat to listen to. I'm just lucky I'm in a spot where a lot of times a year that I can hear them. I've had people that have never heard one, never seen one. And Chuck called me, asked if we could bring them out so they could see if he'd have any experience with them. And we did. It was the right month. It was in August. And we were cooked outside, which helps. And then played some music. And it was something I've wanted to try. And it worked. It was a different kind of music, not just any music. It was a tribal music. And I know we had 2 and maybe 3. We got to see them on thermal and night vision. And we got to hear several. And the first few, then after I made my call, the first few we heard, you could definitely tell it wasn't cattle, it wasn't coyotes. So they had a pretty interesting evening. And then part of them, 3:00 in the morning, got to hear the little one. And it was across the road at the neighbors at their barn. But it's not 200 feet over to that barn. Yeah, they said it was 3 a.m. and they started making that cry, which, they were all real happy. They had some experience with them, little encounters. But if you're out there, be careful. And I've got more experiences, but, this will probably be good for one night. And anybody that is having trouble around their home, I'm open to get in contact with me because we have gone out and helped people that were having problems. They really weren't serious problems. They were just around all the time. And we had to make some changes, and they didn't have as much contact with them after that. And it helped them. I like to help people because I know I need help at times, and I don't mind helping people. And neither does the rest of the crew, Rick, Larry, Chuck. We try to help people. We don't know it all. I mean, there's nobody that knows. There's no experts in the Bigfoot. I've just been writing down everything I can on what I've observed which is different from some. And some people say, that's not right. Well, every area can be different. Just like here, we don't have the trees that everybody else does. So I'm sure they're doing things different here than they would do elsewhere. But I just fascinated by these things, and I just want to learn more. And I hope you all enjoyed this. And if you need any help, for those that would like to contact me, probably the easiest way would be my email, which is bcoy22@yahoo.com. And that's B as in Bob, COY 22@yahoo.com. I hope you all have a good evening. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, love's in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah, the sound of a memory brings me back to the bluegrass playing on my dad's 8-track. His pickup man had been through it, getting through the day on Scruggs and Skags, booking hay bales to those Tennessee jams. There's no other way that I'd do it. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Something going backwards and double time, getting to the soul and the tremolo Kentucky style. Those are the anthems strumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Pace of the city life drives me wild. The only tune is the cars rushing by, with the bass on the stereos booming. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Something going backwards and double time, getting to the soul and the tremolo Kentucky style. Those are the anthems strumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Something going backwards and double time, getting to the soul and the tremolo Kentucky style. Those are the anthems strumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm, fried chicken, porch swing, mama's best sweet tea kind of sound.